Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Get Geek podcast, where we celebrate geek, nerd, and pop culture. Each week, we deliver the best analysis for fans, by fans, on anything related to movies, TV, video games, comics, anime, and manga. We talk geek. And now, here's the Get Geek podcast.
What's going on, y'all? What's going on, y'all, out there, denizens of the internet? Welcome to the Get Geek podcast. Welcome to another lovely, wonderful, and fantastic episode of the Get Geek podcast. I am Jose.
This is AJ.
This is Eli.
And this is Spanish Widow coming from the Red Room, Walt.
Yeah, indeed. That's a hint as to what we're going to have a little conversation about today. This is me having a sip of coffee as we record early in the morning here.
Yeah, man. You know.
All right. That gave me a little bit of a boost. So let's do our quick thing, a quick disclaimer, or not even a disclaimer. We're not doing that anymore. We've been recording remotely for a while. If y'all have any issues with the audio, you probably would have told us by now. So we're moving past that. Talking about the best thing you can do to support your favorite podcast is to like, rate, share, subscribe, and comment on your favorite podcast. Also, slide into our DMs. Send us an email. You can find us at Get Geek Podcast on Instagram and basically everywhere else in all the other social media platforms. Just look for Get Geek Podcast. And yeah, like, rate, share, subscribe, comment, support your favorite podcast crew by engaging with your favorite podcast crew. So yeah,
There you go.
let's get right into it. We got a couple of things we're going to talk about today. Y'all did a little bit about Loki and the Bad Batch in one of our more recent episodes. But what I wanted to do today is jump in real quick, and we'll do this early and see if we have any predictions for the finale of Loki, or episode 6, coming up in just a few days. So before I give my own predictions, I want to throw it to the floor and see if anybody is interested in giving any possible predictions on what's going to happen in Loki. And if not, I'll jump in with my thoughts and you guys can tell me what you think about it. Anybody?
Well, I actually think I touched on this last time. I think that the person behind all this interesting web of webbiness is the true variant Loki. Like the whatchamacallit,
Classic Loki.
the variant to rule them all.
That's
Is behind all this smoke and mirrors.
President
That is the
Loki.
TVA.
President Loki.
King Loki.
No.
So, you know, I agree. That's actually part of what I'm thinking is going to happen in the finale. And I mean, it's hinted at if you watch the trailers. There's scenes that we have not seen so far in the show, and it could be a misdirect. You know how Marvel does. But there's scenes of, you know, Loki standing there in front of a massive throne, and it's a Loki with a different demeanor, a different attitude. Unless this Loki, our Loki, has been playing the long game, as has been hinted at throughout the show by Mobius and by other characters. Unless this Loki is playing the long game and he's actually evil, or Sylvie is actually evil, which are other possibilities too. They could be the leaders of the TVA. I'm thinking I agree with AJ, but I want to take it maybe one step further, because I think they're going to mess with the origins of some other characters here. And I think that they're going to do something different with the King Loki character. Possibly. This is just a theory of mine. I put this together from a couple of other things that I've seen on the internet and some theories about what I know about who controls time and the TVA and the characters that we've seen so far. So we've seen Eliath, right, who's a major character that is in conflict with the most theorized villain behind all of this, which is Kang the Conqueror. And AJ, you're a big fan of Kang the Conqueror, if I'm not mistaken, right? He's one of your favorite Marvel villains.
No.
This wasn't you. Who is it?
I made a really good guess before this entire phase started that this is gonna be a Kang the Conqueror who's gonna be the Thanos of this, you know,
This phase.
This arc.
Yeah.
This arc. Yes.
Right. I don't know who it is. I'm sorry. I'm making I'm having a mental fart here as to who the huge fan of King the Conqueror is. But here's what I'm thinking. I'll wrap it up in a nutshell, and then we can definitely see if that's what you guys agree with, and we can get into our main conversation today, which is, by the way, Black Widow. So here's my theory that changes things a little bit for Marvel. We have Alioth, who's supposed to be the first being that breaks free of time, and his origin is similar to what it is in the comics. He's got more of an empire in the comics. He's not so much of a guard dog like he is in these episodes of Loki that we've seen so far. So that's why I think that things are going to change a little bit. I think King Loki is definitely behind it. I also think that they're going to change Kang's origin story. I think they're going to make King Loki into the new Immortus. And the reason why I say that is, so the reason why I have that as the theory is, y'all know who Immortus is, right? Y'all have a pretty good idea of who Immortus is?
No idea.
Okay, so we're going to have to get a little bit into Kang's backstory a little bit to kind of put this together. Immortus is actually Kang. He's a version of Kang in the comics. The way that it works is, I'll try to explain his backstory as best as I can because it's super freaking complicated, as you guys might imagine. But Kang is originally from, I think, the 31st century. He's like super bored because it's awesome and peaceful, and he hates how peaceful and awesome it is, apparently, because as one is wont to do, like, why would you want to live in peace and joy and harmony and have all your needs taken care of? That's boring, right? So long story short, he travels back in time. He becomes a pharaoh, I think, called Ramen Tut. He goes back to the time of of Apocalypse from the X-Men comics. I think he interacts with him. Like I said, I'm trying to do this as best as I can without making it too confusing. But what Kang essentially is in the comics is he goes through time. He uses various versions of himself, and there are different versions of him, like Immortus, who is Kang, I think later in the timeline. I forget where it is, but what Kang does is he conquers a portion of the timeline. He's not in control of all of time. Alioth is in control of the beginning of time. Kang, as Immortus, is in control of like 7 centuries, I think 4000 BC to like 3000 AD. Okay. And then after that, Kang himself, Kang the Conqueror, the official Kang the Conqueror, is in control of the rest of time. Okay. If I'm not mistaken. So what I think is happening, I think that the void that we see in episode 5, I don't think that's the actual end of time. I think that's the end of Immortus Loki's time period. So what I think is going to happen is they're going to find Loki, like AJ said, they're going to find Loki in the castle. He's going to be the one behind all of it, the TVA and all of that. It's going to be revealed that he's an Immortus type character. Maybe they won't name him, but he's going to fulfill that role. And then what's going to happen, at least in my opinion, again, in this theory, is that once they get rid of Immortus in the comics, what that does a lot of times is that gives Kang the opportunity to take over more of the timeline. So if he can get access to those 7 centuries, then that means that he can jump in and start messing with the Avengers, start messing with the MCU characters that we're used to, because they're not going up to the 31st century to tell an Avengers story. So they have to bring it back to the modern time. And one more thing that I will mention, and then I'll let y'all give your thoughts on that, and we'll move on if you guys don't have much to say or if you think the theory is stupid, whatever. One more thing in the comics is that Kang repeatedly tries to get control, if I'm not mistaken, of the Scarlet Witch because of her abilities as a Nexus being. So if you think about everything that we've seen so far in the Marvel shows, what we know is coming up in Ant-Man and the Wasp Quantumania, or I think it's Ant-Man Quantumania. I'm not sure what the full title is. But so Ant-Man Quantumania, if we know what's coming, if we know what we see in the trailer, if we know a little bit about the comics, then I think that that's how this is all going to turn out. I think that, again, AJ's theory is perfectly correct. It's going to be a variant of Loki, but I think they're going to tie him into Immortus. So based on what I told you about Kang's incredibly convoluted backstory and the fact that we know that he's coming, what do you guys think of the theory? Do you think it's dumb? Do you think it's awesome? Do you think it needs work? Do you agree? Do you disagree? And any thoughts y'all have before we move on to Black Widow?
I think that it fits with the timeline and everything that we've actually like gotten and stuff.
Mhm.
Because, I mean, like you said, you had WandaVision,
Mhm.
and then Yeah, it just really fits with it.
Okay. And do you like the theory? Do you think it's a good way to go forward with the next few movies and things that we're going to see? Remember, the next stuff we're going to see is the Eternals, Shang-Chi, and then this is all leading into Spider-Man Far From Home, No Way Home, excuse
Yeah.
me,
No way.
No Way Home, and Doctor Strange in the Multiverse of Madness. Based on what you know about those movies, do you think that this would be a solid theory to lead into it, or is there something else that you think would be better? I guess I'll leave with that final question.
I don't think we get Kang or Immortus in this
Yeah.
series at all. I think maybe at best you get a hint of it. I think it's going to be one of the Lokis
Mhm.
that, because we've been seeing Loki mania in Loki. I even think they probably kind of messed up because there was a Twitter post where Marvel Studios put out all the Lokis, and they included Hunter B21. I think it is
B20. Is it
B20.
that's the character that was enchanted by Sylvie and
Yes.
is now betraying the TVA? She's locked up. Last we saw her. Yeah.
So the internet was afire with the fact that Hunter may be a Loki. So there's
Okay.
Oh, I didn't see
it's
that.
interesting. Oh yeah, they showed all the Lokis: alligator Loki, kid Loki, President Loki, and she was in there. They just dropped the thing on her. So it appears that the TVA is almost, you want to almost say that they're exclusively made by Lokis.
There was a
You know,
theory.
if we're falling that train of thought.
Yeah, I mean, there's a theory that I saw, or I'm sorry, it's Hunter B15. B20, I think, was the one, or C20 was the variant who ended up dying that was enchanted early on.
Okay.
So it's
Yeah, I didn't
B15
remember.
is the one.
B15.
There was a theory going around that Mobius is a Loki variant also. So this kind of ties into what you're saying. I mean, yeah,
So
I definitely think it's going to be a Loki behind it. I guess the only thing that I'm thinking is that they're going to change Immortus' backstory only because it's super freaking convoluted otherwise. So if you make this Loki and Immortus, quote unquote, it fulfills the role of the character, and then you don't have to go and explain all this crap down the road when we watch Quantumania. So that's the only reason why I think that maybe they're going to simplify it by making him an Immortus, quote unquote, again. But we'll see what happens. I think we all kind of agree that it's going to be a variant of Loki, whatever his name is, right?
I want to see how they tie in Kang to the Fantastic Four, because we know Fantastic Four is coming, and Kang is the perfect setup for Fantastic Four because, well, he's related to them.
Yeah,
He's
so
Nathaniel Richards.
Yeah.
So he's the 31st century great whatever of the Richards and whatnot.
Reed and all of them.
So it'll be interesting how they figure out that and put it in. I have faith that they'll do it, and I have faith that they'll do it well. But I'm just curious to see how that works out.
Yeah, I really, really can't wait to see what they're going to do with this. And I think, I know y'all had a chance to look into it last week, but Loki is definitely one of my favorite shows so far. And it has its problems. I'm not going to get into review.
Yeah.
You guys talked about that, and we'll talk about that, I guess, when the finale drops. We can talk about what it is as a whole.
Yeah.
But I've really been enjoying it. And I think I like the direction where it's going. We'll see.
I've noticed within the last couple episodes the issues that it has. Before, I was really, really enjoying it, but now those issues are coming a little bit to the forefront here. And a lot of it has to do with the short seasonness of it. But you know what? Like you said, we'll deal with that when we talk about the season finale, which is coming up in 3 days. So
yeah. I mean,
we'll get into it more.
There's some things that I will say the Marvel formula actually doesn't necessarily help the show, and I'll leave it at that. I think that there's some stuff that they could do with it if they didn't stick so much to the formula that would have made it probably a lot better. But like I said, and like you said, we'll talk about that when we do our wrap up of the entire season, which should be coming in the next couple of weeks. Maybe we'll give you all a break from Loki next week, but we'll see what happens. So tune in to every episode, and you'll get to see what we think about Loki when it finally wraps up. So, any other thoughts, gentlemen? Anything from Mr. AJ, from Mr. Eli? Do you guys kind of agree that this is a decent theory? We're going to see a Loki as the variant that ends up being in charge of the TVA, and that's that.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, that works.
That is a sign off. I like that one. So that's our theory.
Yep.
I've seen it out there. We're not the only ones that came up with this theory, but if we're right, give us some congratulations in a couple of weeks when we figured out the whole thing, especially if my theory is correct and Loki is a form of Immortus. But anyway, moving on. Let's get into the other MCU big thing that we saw this week. I guess, we've all checked out Black Widow thus far, yes? Everybody's...
I think we were probably the first ones that saw it because we saw it on Friday night.
Friday night. Yeah.
So
I saw it like last night in a couple of hours. I had to kind of binge watch it because I had a lot of stuff going on this weekend and a lot of plans, but I was able to fit it in.
That's kind of good because you know what? We have two perspectives here. We have the perspective of somebody who's seen it just recently, and we've had a little bit of time to marinate it, in terms of we've had a couple of days to really soak in the stuff. And I think for me that's going to make a difference in how I talk about Black Widow today.
Should we? So I'm kind of at a loss here. I feel like you guys should start since you saw it first, but I don't know if I should start in order to...
Why don't you start? Why don't you give your first impressions? Because I think mine is going to be, I don't know about the kids, but I think mine's going to be a little bit of a hot take in terms of what it is and how, and I think it'll be a good way to segue into the main discussion. So why don't you give your first impressions of Black Widow first?
Okay, so with the movie, I enjoyed it. I definitely enjoyed it. I'm not going to give a numerical review or anything like that. We're not necessarily here to review it. We're going to talk about...
We're just going to geek out
whatever.
over it.
Yeah, we're going to talk about theories. We're going to talk about everything that we saw in the movie. But so I enjoyed it. I mentioned this in one of our chats yesterday. There's definitely parts of the movie that have like Bourne Identity vibes, which I had heard was something that they were going to try to do with this movie, which I enjoyed.
Yeah, they had... You had that. You had some Mission Impossible in there and stuff like that. So definitely, very spycraft.
Yeah, they took from a lot of different spy movies, from James Bond, Mission Impossible, Bourne Identity, like you name it.
Yeah, everything there.
And they pulled some influence from it, which I think they did well. Because if a movie does this, where they're like pulling influences from a lot of different other films, it can get really cluttered and weird and confusing and difficult to follow. And it can ruin the story, I think, to a certain extent. So I thought it was well done for a story that did definitely pull from a lot of different places. I thought the action was really good. Like I said, it had those Bourne Identity vibes. So like even, for example, where I got that idea what I was watching when I said that was, as you guys might have gathered, the first fight between Natasha Romanoff, Black Widow, and Yelena, her sister. When they're fighting in that kitchen or whatever, it's like so Bourne Identity vibes. I mean, it's like Bourne Identity turned up to 11 because they're like throwing each other all over the place, like worse than Bourne Identity.
I think in the first Bourne Identity, there was a fight in an apartment. I think with Carl Urban. Was Carl Urban the one that was in there?
I believe you're right. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And it was very, very visually similar.
Yeah.
So you're absolutely right.
And all that stuff. Very similar in a lot of ways. So, but I had fun with it. I like really enjoyed it. I thought the action is... So I'll put it this way. Like, other than Falcon and the Winter Soldier, and I was going to say, like I said earlier, this is a double-edged sword because sometimes Marvel shoehorning action into something is not something that I've been appreciating in some of the recent shows. Some of them, okay? But in this movie, it works because the action is fantastic in pretty much every action scene. You got that action scene. You got the fights with Taskmaster, which I think are really, really good. So overall, I think it was a good movie. Like I said, the things that end up taking away from it to a certain extent are the Marvel formula, which I think we could do an episode about that in the future, because I actually want to talk about that in another podcast that I do. I wanted to talk about Martin Scorsese's opinion on Marvel. I think that it's relevant here because, yeah, they put in a lot of extra action. They try to squeeze in a certain amount of humor. There's certain things they have to checklist, and it ends up slowing the movie down to a certain extent. It ends up messing with the pacing, and it just doesn't. It's not as good as it can be as a result of that. But like I said, that being said, it was a fun movie. I really enjoyed the new Black Widow. Yelena is awesome. Florence Pugh does a fantastic job. She's funny. She's tough. She's relatable. So she's a really good character. I thought that the Red Guardian was pretty funny, even though he was a bit over the top. I think you hear that AJ is laughing a little bit at that. David Harbour does a fun job with that. And, his whole Captain America thing was pretty funny. So I enjoyed that as well. I think I'm usually a huge fan of Rachel Weisz, but her character in this movie didn't make a lot of sense to me. I think that's the one thing that I was kind of like, I'm not too sure about your motivations. I think it was a little weird how she shifted her motivations so quickly, and there wasn't a lot of clarity in what she was doing, and her accent was the worst. I mean, David Harbour did okay.
Yes, it was.
Florence Pugh did not so bad with the Russian accent. Not Rachel Weisz, unfortunately. But I guess
she was a little distracting.
Yeah, it was a little distracting. I thought the villains were good also. I thought everything was really, really solid. I thought Taskmaster was fun. I thought that the way that they played with Taskmaster's origin story was fun. And yeah, I mean, that's kind of what I thought of it from watching it just a few hours ago, not too far removed from it, just watching some YouTube videos with like Easter eggs and stuff like that. And yeah, that's my thoughts on the movie thus far. What about y'all that are a couple of days removed from it? I think I want to hear from AJ since I heard him laughing about Red Guardian on this one.
Yes, Red Guardian is amazing in this movie.
And we're going to get to see him again, most likely, it seems, right?
Like,
hopefully.
And it's like you said, just the way he Captain America was never recovered in the 1980s.
His stories were great.
Right. So, right, for the bit of context, he was in prison and he was arm wrestling with a bunch of inmates, and he's a super soldier. For those who don't know anything about Red Guardian, he's basically
Russian.
Captain America and a super soldier. He's the Russian version of Captain America. And he's talking about when he fought Captain America in like 83 or 84, right? Even though
84.
Like AJ said, Captain America was still in the ice, which one of the inmates points out to hilarious effect. But like, yeah, tell me what else you thought about Red Guardian and the rest of it. I just wanted to give that bit of context.
I thought it was interesting. I mean, I thought like he's kind of a bumbling fool, but you discover later in the movie that all right, maybe maybe he's not, well, he's still a bumbling fool, but he's a little deeper than that. And it was he had a great scene with Yelena with the American Pie thing. I thought that was pretty great.
Oh, that whole scene was good. I agree.
Yeah.
I thought it was solid because it was funny, it was affecting, it was dramatic. It was really, really interesting. You know what I was thinking while you were talking about all this? One of my favorite scenes was when he was congratulating Natasha and Yelena on like how murderous they were. Basically, your ledgers must be red with blood. I'm so proud of you. I thought that part was pretty funny, and like all those scenes were what made me enjoy Red Guardian as a character, because he's bumbling, but he's like kind of weird in the head, and like he would praise somebody for being like a freaking mass murderer. So I thought that was funny. What else did you think about it?
Yeah. Taskmaster was also pretty interesting. They kind of made them what did you say, a super adaptoid?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Which has been done in the comics. So, but a little weird.
Taskmaster wasn't. I don't want to say terrible. I mean, I was a little disappointed because Taskmaster is great because he's not, he or she is not being aided by technology in order to mimic the moves of the Avengers and whatnot. It's all from memory
Hmm.
Mm-hmm.
and just his sheer ability
Yeah.
to replicate their fighting techniques. So I was a little disappointed when it was like, oh, so it's a technology hinge.
Yeah.
Oh, whatever. Yeah. But otherwise, yeah, the rest of the movie was great.
What was some of your
Just
favorite stuff in the movie? Like besides the Red Guardian stuff, was there a good action scene or anything like that?
the apartment scene was very brutal.
The fight between
That was,
Yelena and Natasha in the apartment?
yeah,
Yeah, that was
that.
fun.
Oh. And then the only other thing that I guess was pretty like wow was when Black Widow was in the room with the leader of the who's
Oh,
it's
the red
the
red
Black
red room.
Widows, yeah, in the Red
Hmm.
Room, yeah,
Dracoff.
and yeah, Dreykov, and she was kind of like, well, see, I know you wanted. I was kind of expecting you to hit me harder, so I guess I'm just gonna have to do this better myself. And then she just proceeds to slam her face on the table to sever the nerve.
Oh yeah,
It was
because
just wow.
just for that moment of context in that scene, apparently, so the actor Ray Winstone who played Dreykov was not exactly controlling Black Widow, because a lot of the story in this, right, we'll get to it, is like a mind control serum basically and trying to stop that. But like, what was it that if Black Widow smelled his pheromones, she would be unable to attack him? So that's why she broke her
Yeah.
nose, and she was like, I can't smell you anymore, so now I could kick your butt. That was a fun scene.
Yeah.
I like that whole scene too. I agree. I thought it was really solid, and I thought the villain could have been super cheesy and cliche, but it ended up being pretty cool. It ended up not being those things necessarily. So,
Yeah.
what else?
Eli, what did you think?
Yeah.
Oh well, um, Black Widow was okay because okay, I'm giving it the benefit of the doubt.
The corn
Yeah, I
saber
was gonna
has
say,
come
how
out.
corny is it?
It's not corny. It's not corny. It's not corny. It's not corny. It's the villains.
Okay. Mm-hmm.
Like you guys mentioned Taskmaster being all about technology,
Mm-hmm.
and to be fair, I didn't really like Taskmaster in this movie because
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. It's because in the comics he's like power based, right? It's his power, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. So then, yeah,
His
I sort of liked the original Taskmaster better, but whatever.
what is it? Tony Masterson in the comics, I think, is the name.
Tony Masters.
Masters.
Tony Masters. Yeah.
Excuse me.
Mhm.
Go ahead, Eli.
But there's one villain especially who I didn't like.
Mhm.
Well, the main villain, which is Drake.
Oh, interesting. Okay, I thought he was good, but go ahead. Tell me what you thought about why it wasn't so great.
I felt that he had a lot. He had a lot more to him that should have been pushed a little bit more into the story,
Mm-hmm.
because I felt that he wasn't like, it was almost like he wasn't given enough time.
Mm-hmm.
That's at least how I felt. It was more of a reunion than it was an actual like chasing down the actual bad guy.
Mm-hmm.
At least for me. So it was like, I don't know. I would have appreciated it more if Dreykov was a little bit more pushed into the story. Not like, oh, I heard stories of Dreykov and whatever he's done and stuff like that. Yeah.
Okay.
Okay. What about you, Walt? You want to give your impressions on the film, please?
Yeah.
Couple of days removed.
Well,
Mm-hmm.
it's interesting because the last MCU film we got was 2 years
Spider-Man,
ago.
right?
2 years ago. Spider-Man came out July 2nd, 2019.
Yeah, I went to see it.
It's been
I think I went to see it with the boys. Yeah.
it's been 113 weeks since we've gotten an MCU film.
Mhm.
791 days. It's been a long
Yeah,
time.
it really has been.
We're here, and there's something different. I know we've gotten the 3 MCU series, but there's something different about an MCU film, right?
Yeah.
There's something that's really, really, everybody anticipates that. And just so everybody knows, we in terms of me, AJ, and Eli, we didn't see it in the movie theaters. We saw it through Disney Plus's Premiere
Same.
Access.
Yeah. Did the same.
Okay, so maybe that I want to clarify that because maybe the movie theater experience may have been a little bit different. I doubt it. For me, I enjoyed the film overall. I thought it was well done in terms of, like you had said before, the action, the pacing was great. The choreography was awesome. We didn't have that. The one thing that we don't have from those Spycraft movies is that shaky cam where you can't see what really is going on with the action.
Yeah.
We didn't get that here, which I appreciate.
There was a little bit in the scene between Natasha and Yelena, because that's kind of how that scene was in The Bourne Identity, but it was visible and easy to see in The Bourne Identity. We've talked about how that ruins movies in the past when you can't see
exactly.
fights. Like Mortal Kombat,
that's one thing. That's one thing that I did appreciate of the movie, that we actually got to see the action as opposed to that whole shaky cam footage, which I'm really not a fan of.
No. Not at all.
I thought the performances were great. David Harbour in particular, you guys have already mentioned him. He's one of those guys that I don't think gets as much recognition as he should have, because he really, really is a very good actor. And he takes a wide swath of roles, and he plays them to perfection.
I think part of that is that, like, you look at something like Hellboy, which was supposed to be like his Arrival, and it wasn't that good. It's kind of sad that,
but that's not his fault.
It's not, but
because
that the actor kind of gets blamed in a way when it doesn't.
Oh yeah, of course.
That's why
but you know what?
He's underappreciated, like you said. I think.
Right. I think his Hellboy was great. I just think the story really failed him. You know what I'm saying? So Hellboy is not, his fault per se, because he did what he did with the role, and I thought he did great with the role. So the problem that I have watching Black Widow is more of a disappointment, because yes, this is a movie that was pushed back for a year because of the pandemic, but this is a movie that should have came out years ago.
I agree.
You look at the MCU as a universe, we've gotten 3 Captain America films, we've gotten 3 Iron Man films, we're about to get a 4th Thor film. Captain Marvel, who's been in the MCU for a minute, has already gotten a film before Black Widow did, and is getting a second one. We're not guaranteed a second Black Widow movie because, quite honestly, she's dead.
Yeah, you might get maybe Yelena in a Black Widow movie, possibly, but we'll see.
And that's the other issue that I have, because you know what? If fans have been waiting for a Black Widow movie for quite a while, and this felt more like a to use a TV term, a backdoor pilot for Yelena's character. I felt there was a lot of focus on her to the detriment of Scarlett Johansson's Natasha Romanoff. I think and perfect example is the scene where they were having dinner with and they're reunited for the first time. And the emotional focus of that scene was Yelena. Natasha was kind of just in it,
and it was a good scene with Yelena. But I agree with you.
Yeah, absolutely.
This has been a problem with Black Widow, unfortunately, since the beginning, because I was saying this to my girlfriend, to Claire, yesterday. It's like, and it's exactly to your point. This movie should have come out years ago for a variety of reasons. Obviously, because why hadn't there been a female-led superhero film for almost 10 friggin' years? That's ridiculous, number one. But number two...
And then you get Captain Marvel first.
Yeah, you get Captain Marvel first.
Which is criminal.
Which I see kind of why, to an extent, but like, because, she's an Oscar-nominated actress, right? So they're trying to find like Benedict Cumberbatch and all these actors who are like really, really well regarded.
I get that.
But that's the thing. That's my point, though. My point is, I'm going to agree with you here, because my point is Scarlett Johansson is also a Oscar nominated actor. She's one of the most accomplished actors in the MCU. She always was.
Absolutely.
Chris Hemsworth ain't won nothing. You know, Mark Ruffalo, maybe you could say, Robert Downey Jr., Benedict Cumberbatch, of course. But most of the other people who are leading characters in the MCU, because they have some people who are supporting characters that are also, you know, Oscar nominated or what have you. But when you have an actor of this caliber and you just have her on the sidelines for a whole decade,
Right.
and then the other thing is her characterization was too much of like the straight woman character. She was always the matriarch, which is a slight part of her in the comics, but it's not really a focus of her in the comics at all. She's just a badass in the comics. She's a awesome spy in the comics, and she's actually a little bit dark. Like in the comics, she's not like this matriarch
Oh yeah,
looking to
absolutely.
bring everybody together. I mean, she is to a certain extent, because, you know, she loves her friends in the comics. She's an awesome superhero. But they took away from what you can do with the character. And you're right. Yelena gets to be funny, gets to be interesting, gets the emotional centers of the movie, and Scarlett Johansson is just kind of there. And this is a complaint I
And
heard
we're
about the
not
movie.
gonna
Like, you could take her out of the movie entirely and still have the same story to a certain extent.
right, and we're probably not gonna get another iteration of Natasha Romanoff anymore, because
Just what if, maybe.
Scarlett
That's it.
Johansson has been on the record that she's done with the character.
Okay.
That she is going to work with Marvel, but behind the scenes. So, you know, this is an example of where you have a character that has a really rich history and a lot of stories that you could have told, and she's gone.
Yeah.
So that was kind of disappointing in watching the film, and as much as I was enjoying the film, I always had that in the back of my mind, is like, you know, this is going to be really it, because there are no more stories to tell because of the way Endgame finished and where we are in the MCU. So Natasha Romanoff is done. We're not going to get any more stories. That to me is really, really disappointing.
Yep. Especially with how solid this movie was. It was solid. It wasn't
Right.
the best movie ever, but like, I would have liked to have seen a sequel. And then maybe you have that post-credit stinger that was at the end of this one, at the end of the second one.
Well, I'm going to talk about that post-credit
Yeah.
scene, because I did not like that post-credit
We got to
scene
talk about that for sure, but let's continue with impressions and see where we go from there.
I'm gonna. So you have that with the Black Widow movie, where, you know, this should have come out a long time ago, and the focus should have been on Natasha Romanoff. You know, Yelena's gonna get her shot. They could have held her off a little bit in terms of the focus of the story, but I get why they're doing it. The other thing that I was very disappointed is the treatment of Taskmaster, in my opinion, was criminal.
Okay.
I really don't believe that they did the character they did the character well. And listen, I am not going to get into the gender swapping. That is not the issue for me at all. I'm totally fine with it. It makes sense in the construct of the story.
A lot of people predicted that too, because it's a woman-centered film, so they're like, it's got to be a female villain,
and it makes sense. But even that, take that away, it makes sense, because, you know, it's part of the story. It's built in with Dreykov, which,
the Red Room.
interesting enough, this is not the first time we've heard of Dreykov's daughter, because she was in the original Avengers.
Loki mentions her.
You know, yeah, exactly. You know, and so I find it interesting that they kind of come back, but that's what Marvel is really, really good at, dropping these little seeds in previous movies and then coming back to pay them off.
Right, because they always talked about Budapest, and like you said, Loki talked about that in the Avengers to kind of try to get inside Natasha's head about the bad things she's done in the past. And the flashback was solid too. I think the flashback scene was pretty cool, where they showed her like watching this girl blow up and like her emotions behind that. But continue, please, if you have.
But Taskmaster, to me, it's criminal what they did to the character, because the character, it's not a main villain, but it's a very interesting villain. It's a villain that you can drop in Captain America, you can drop in Iron Man, and quite honestly, the depiction of Taskmaster in this film, felt to me, and I'm going to use a video game term here, he felt like a DLC skin, because you could have taken that character, substituted her for one of the Red Room assassins, and the movie does not change at all, except for the fact that it's the daughter. But other than that, Taskmaster was barely there. She was only there for the fight scenes.
Hmm.
There was really no, and we know Taskmaster as being kind of like this good guy, bad guy type of thing in the
You
comics.
know,
You know,
like
he
what
he goes
comes.
after the Avengers. He becomes a trainer of the Avengers. I don't. Taskmaster to me was poorly done in this. It goes back to the original villain issue that Marvel had. It plays into this movie here. The last thing I want to say, and it's going to be about that end credit scene, and I'm not going to get into it. We'll talk about it a little bit later. But to me, that end credit scene, and again, I understand why they did it. It seems like it was thematically off with the rest of the movie.
It might have been one of those things that they just ended up adding, right? Because this movie's been supposed to come out for so long. I think it was supposed to come out still after Endgame, but I mean, I don't know. It did seem like a little bit shoehorned
It
in
was
there.
supposed to come out last year,
Yeah,
and we were supposed to get the introduction of Elaine from Seinfeld. I forgot her. Julia Dreyfus Louis, right?
Julia Louis Dreyfus. Yeah.
Louis Dreyfus. I'm sorry. She was supposed to be introduced in this, and instead was introduced in Falcon and the Winter Soldier because of the timing issue. You know,
Hmm.
but again, I just to me it felt thematically off, especially with Yelena's character. And I'll just leave it at that, and we can discuss that a little bit later.
Yeah, but Julia Louis Dreyfus, by the way, is playing a character in the comics called Valentina Allegra de Fontaine.
The Countessa.
And yes, she is seemingly putting together a team
Dark Avengers.
all of the Dark Avengers. But we'll
Hey.
see if that ends up being the thing too. But I mean, you're sort of right. I mean, Taskmaster could have been fleshed out a little bit more in the comics. He's more of a character with the agency. Like, I don't know, it's not exactly the same, but I think Deathstroke, like almost like a similar, like a Marvel version of Deathstroke. I know Deathstroke isn't as much of an anti-hero, but like similar like abilities almost, right? I know it's not exactly the same,
Right.
but all right. So those are our impressions. Let's get into it in a little more detail, I think. So I guess, yeah, I'll push the Taskmaster conversation a little bit further, I should say. You're kind of right. Like, there's definitely nothing wrong with the character, like, gender swap.
Yeah, no issues with that whatsoever.
The action scenes were solid, too.
Yeah.
But it felt... I mean, I like the character for the most part. It felt a little bit like Ant-Man and the Wasp with the villain in that one, where it was kind of a last-second reveal as to who it was, right? Or it wasn't a last-second reveal, but like it was like one of those anti-hero type villains that instead of getting their own agency, like Taskmaster generally would, he's just controlled by Dreykov, and that takes away a little bit from the character. I will say that in terms of action scenes, I thought that Taskmaster could be a little problematic, right? Because it's kind of hard, I think, to illustrate in a movie a character that can learn something really quickly and use it against their foes without it being either cheesy or even starting to get full of plot holes, right? Because if you learn a certain ability, then later on you don't know how to counteract a certain ability. But I thought it was solid. I thought it was cool how, like, in those scenes where Black Widow tries to do her famous Huracan Rana or whatever that wrestling move is, the head scissor takedown, that Taskmaster was ready for it from watching all this other stuff. But there was also...
and you saw some fighting styles that she was showing off as well,
right,
you know, in terms of the other Avengers.
That was the only thing I was going to say. I kind of would have liked to have seen some more overt, like, I mean, the shield obviously was Captain America, that using the arrows was Hawkeye. I would have liked to have seen a little bit more of the very specific stuff that they do in the fights. I thought that would have been pretty cool. But I mean, overall, I thought it was a fairly solid representation of the character. But my question now is, where do they go with this character? Because that's where they kind of lost it in terms of like comparison to the Taskmaster character in the comics. The Taskmaster character in the comics, like you said, is a sometimes friend, sometimes enemy of the Avengers. Here, it just seems like Taskmaster is going to be like a friend and a hero now that her mind control is broken. But I don't know. I guess we'll see what ends up happening with this character in the future. So
Yeah, it seems like a waste of the character at this point for now. Because like I said, you could have done some interesting things with the character because he's in the comics such a foil. He's a very difficult character to fight, quite honestly, because you know what? He has the ability to, because he knows your fighting style, he has the ability to kind of counteract anything that you throw
yeah,
at
he
him,
was
you know?
beating the heck out of Red Guardian. So
Exactly. So, I think that there was a missed opportunity. And again, you could have taken Taskmaster out of this film and it wouldn't have made a difference at all.
so we
You know,
could have taken Natasha out and we could have taken Taskmaster out, and it would have been the same movie, is what we're kind of trying to say here. It seems, right?
yeah, it's a little bit, like I said, disappointing is kind of the word that I have for it. Even though I like the movie, but disappointing in some of the choices that they made with some of the characters here.
So I guess on that note, just to touch on it a little bit, like, what did you guys think in terms of the story overall, right? Because we have the story. I'll explain semi quickly. You know, you have Natasha, who's broken away from her family. They show her backstory with Red Guardian and Rachel Weisz's character. I think it's Yelena, right? And then we show them in the future where Yelena, her sister, is still under the control of the Red Room, and it's a whole mind control thing, right? They have these vials that are controlling all of the widows, and the movie essentially, which I thought this was cool, I'll say, I thought it was good that they made it a personal story instead of making it some bigger thing. They really needed to give us some personal Black Widow stuff. But yeah, that's basically the story, right? They have this mind control serum that the main villain Dreykov is using to control and destroy the lives of all these women. He's basically kidnapping them, turning them into child soldiers, which is some stuff that we saw before. But yeah, like, what did you guys think of the story overall? AJ, I'm curious what you thought of it in terms of the story, not just, like you said, the other details, the action, and the other things that we've discussed.
I mean, I liked it. It's not the absolute greatest, and kind of hearing that Black Widow, my bad, Black Widow got the back seat in her own movie, kind of colors it different for me now.
Did you get that feeling
So
while you
I
were?
don't know.
Did you get that feeling while you were watching it, or is that something that you're more thinking about now that we're discussing it a little bit?
I didn't really see it before, but now that you guys are kind of mentioning it, I don't know. It really does seem like that, though. So I don't know. I don't know how to take that.
Okay.
As far as the villains go, again, yes, Taskmaster was kind of disappointing. Dreykov, I mean, he was kind of 2D, kind of not. I expected it.
Yeah.
I mean, he really doesn't need to be anything bigger than what he was.
Yeah, that's true.
I mean, he was just an old guy trying to control people, and he's like, "Yeah, the government is at my fingertips." Yeah.
I got a little bit of the vibes from Mission Impossible. What's his name? The actor that passed away that was a Mission Impossible villain, Philip Seymour Hoffman. I got
yes.
slight vibes of Philip Seymour Hoffman in Mission Impossible from Dreykov, which I liked. What else did you? Is there any other thoughts that you
I mean,
had?
it's also kind of interesting too. He kind of accomplished what Hydra failed to
Yeah.
do, because they were trying to set up that whole beat, and then you have this guy who's like kind of a nobody, sort of, kind of, sort of, and he just goes and, yeah, so the world is actually mine.
I like that detail though, because you figure Hydra's out in the open. It's very overt. Everybody knows that they're behind all these things, and the Avengers are always trying to stop them. Captain America's always trying to stop them. It seems like a better plot with this Dreykov guy to basically not exist, quote unquote, to be so under the radar. Nobody knows who he is. Like you said, he's basically a nobody. That's a solid strategy for like controlling things.
Yeah.
And, especially the way he did it with the various widows.
So are we saying that Hydra was taking credit for what the Red Room did?
To a certain extent,
in a sense, because the way he framed it was exactly the way that Hydra frames it. That we're the ones behind the scenes toppling, regimes and installing, things, and whenever there are economic things, that's us. So was it that Hydra was taking credit, thinking that they were the ones doing, or were they working with the Red Room assassins, to kind of get this thing done? It's kind of unclear, and it kind of throws Hydra into the depiction of Hydra into a little bit of a flux here in terms of the MCU, because what exactly were they doing then?
Well, see, that's the
They're
thing.
doing his bidding.
It's like what Uncle Jose said. I mean, Jose said.
Yes, that's me.
It's kind of what Jose said.
We are related. It's okay. We can tell him that.
Yeah.
So
Hydra was very open about it.
Mhm.
We are the ha. It's not until they wisened up after the Second World War that they kind of said, okay, let's kind of take the back seat here.
Mhm.
But even then, they kind of mucked that up.
Yeah.
They were a bunch of bumbling fools if you think about it.
They didn't really do much. Although
No.
the way that Marvel's been playing it, maybe we'll get a semi-retcon, quote unquote, to this, and we'll see how Hydra actually was influencing everything behind the scenes. As long as we don't get Hydra Captain America, I'm okay with some retcons. I don't want to see that.
Hail Hydra.
Yes.
Hail Hydra.
Does Eli want to see
We
that?
need-
Yes.
Yes.
You wanna
as
see
a what
that?
if? As a what if?
Oh, okay, yeah. We'll probably see that.
I don't
in
know
the
about his
animated stuff.
story.
Yeah.
I don't know about his story, but still, as a what
His
if?
story is basically that Steve Rogers was more or less a sleeper agent for Hydra.
Yeah. The
Yeah.
entire time.
That's literally all the story is.
Yes. Yes.
Well, I don't think they can do that in the main storyline,
No,
because
what
if they're
if?
going to do Secret Wars, it's kind of thematically
Yeah.
the same thing,
And plus, if
But
they
bro.
do that, they have to bring Chris Evans back to make Captain America a hero again. And I don't know if Chris Evans wants to do another 2-3 movies to
Yeah.
do that
But
whole
you could
arc.
do Walker.
I mean, he didn't even come in to voice the character in the What If series.
He didn't? Chris Evans?
No, he didn't.
Because I heard
Chris
that
Evans did not.
Benedict Cumberbatch and
Yep.
Captain Marvel, Brie Larson also did not. Is that correct?
And Robert Downey Jr. did not.
Well, yeah, he's probably
So-
like, I got enough money. Y'all could do this on your own.
But Chadwick Boseman did. The I can't remember her name, but the person that played Agent Carter. She
Haley
came
Atwell.
in. I can't remember.
Haley Atwell.
Yes.
Mhm.
So
Yeah, she's a version of Captain America, I think, in this, right?
Exactly.
Okay.
But Chris Evans didn't even come in to do the ADR for What If, so I don't think he's coming back for a movie.
I think it's
either.
fairly clear.
I think he's pretty done.
Yeah.
Okay.
What about Walker?
Yeah, no, we're gonna see more of that for sure, right? Because that's
definitely.
Should we?
So you want U.S.
Yes.
Agent to now make the transition to Captain Hydra?
Yes, totally.
I don't know about that.
No,
He's
as a voice
already
actor.
someone.
As a voice actor,
Kind of
because
there though.
What was that?
no, but as a voice actor, he's obviously not going to come in as actual Hydra agent.
How do you know
Because
that?
then that would be.
How do you know that?
Maybe Hydra's making a comeback.
Well, let's. You know what, Eli?
Yes, that's-
finish your
Don't
thought.
call it a
That's-
comeback. I've been here for years.
Eli, finish your thought, and then actually, I think this is a perfect segue for Walt to jump into that post-credit scene, right? Because we're talking about what these characters are going to end up doing, possibly as villains in the future. So, Eli, finish your thought on that, and then throw it to Walt. and we'll jump in.
Did I not say Hydra is back? Did I not say Hydra is
Yeah.
back? Imagine if you blurred the Red Room with Hydra. You have all these organizations who have no idea that they have ties to Hydra. So Hydra could be like almost even using them.
Maybe you're right. Maybe this guy thought he
yeah.
was pulling the strings, and it really was Hydra still anyway.
The one thing that Hydra does well is infiltrate organizations and governments and
It's
stuff.
a long-term con.
Yeah, it's not beyond the realm of possibility that Hydra was running the Red Room without anybody's knowledge
Yeah.
too. So
They could have been
Yes.
influencing a
Okay.
lot.
Hydra.
Interesting.
Hydra's comeback is nigh.
No, you know what?
Yes. Yes.
Um,
well, we'll
all
see.
right.
We'll see.
All right. So thoughts on the
Um,
post-credit
it-
scene then. Let's jump into that.
yeah, let me just say this one thing real quick about my thoughts of the film itself. I think they didn't give Natasha the origin story that she deserved, I guess.
They kind of
You
did it in
know,
previous films, but it was so short. They just didn't do enough for the character. They learned
yeah.
too
So
late that there could be a really awesome female-led superhero movie. Basically, is what
right,
happened,
exactly.
which is
So
sad.
because I feel they just kind of sprinkled in the origin story into this film and said, okay, we're done with this. Let's move on.
Yeah,
You
and
know,
they're like, Scarlett
and we've gotten
Johansson, we need you to cry for like the whole movie, for like the
yeah,
whole movie.
exactly. So there's that. In terms of the end credit scene, so the end credit scene happened literally at the end of the credits. You know, we didn't get a mid credit scene in this
Yeah.
one. You had to wait until the very last piece of text was on the screen before you got into this. And basically, it's Yelena, and it's at post Endgame.
Yeah.
And she's going to visit the grave of Natasha Romanoff,
Mhm.
and quite clearly she's passed away. There's kind of like a little memorial
Yeah.
in front of her
It says
gravestone.
daughter, sister, Avenger, or something like that, right? Or friend,
Yes, exactly.
Avenger. Which was
And we
cool.
we got that weird little whistle that they kind of implemented in this movie to kind of show the sisterly bond between
Oh
them.
yeah, I thought that was a
Um,
decent little detail though. I thought it was fun. I mean, it
it's
was
okay.
silly, but like,
Yeah,
stuff like that between siblings is silly, sometimes,
I
and they
guess.
haven't
I guess
seen each
it
other
was
since they were kids too. So to me, it made sense.
right.
But that's not the important part of
Yeah,
this.
it was a little weird for me, but again, minor thing.
Hmm.
And so we have her there, and that's when we see the Countessa show up.
Hmm. Yeah.
And it's apparent that Yelena is working for her because she comes up with the next assignment, which is to get the person that in her mind is responsible for Natasha's death, and it's revealed that she's going to be going after Clint Barton.
Which is,
And
go ahead. Yeah.
yeah, but it's clear that she's going to be a part of the Hawkeye
Yeah.
series, um, which is coming up pretty soon. I think it's this year, right?
I believe that it's later this year. We would have to confirm that. I'll
Yeah.
double check while you're giving your thoughts. Go ahead.
Yeah, so you have that there. The problem that I had is that the movie took pains to explain that Yelena was tired of being controlled and stuff like that.
Mhm.
And there's a
Yeah.
different level of control here between Natasha and Yelena, because Natasha, hers was psychological, and so she still had, even though she was being controlled, she still had the notion that she had free will, that she was doing this for the greater good, and stuff like that. Yelena didn't have that benefit because hers was more of a chemically induced um indoctrination. She had no free will. Basically, she was a robot here. And so the movie takes pains to show, the trauma that Yelena had in terms of, being indoctrinated by the Red Room and Dracoff and stuff like that, and doing their will without anything. And then at the very end of the movie, you kind of see her doing the same thing. She's working missions for another person. Now, I know you can say, well, she has the free will to do it, but still, it seems out of place with what we just saw for
Yeah.
2 hours. You know what I'm saying? That now you have another person that's kind of running her life, saying, "Oh, I can't even have some time off," and well, are you ready for your next mission? So thematically, and again, I may be nitpicking here, but thematically, it felt out of place with the rest of the movie. And that was really my biggest issue with that end credit scene, because you've given Yelena the ability to go and do things on her own. And yet she now has another handler. You know what I mean?
I definitely
Yeah,
want
I
to
don't
see
think
what they
that's a
do
nitpick.
with Hawkeye. Go ahead, AJ. Go ahead, AJ. Yeah.
But yeah, I don't think that's a nitpick at all. Like, when I saw that, I was kind of like, at first I was like, oh look, there she is, and I was like, wait, but didn't she? Doesn't she not want this kind of relationship? Like, maybe she chose to work in a very, 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 very like far off thought. Maybe she chose to work for this lady, but why would she choose to work for anyone ever
I
again
have some thoughts.
after having like been like you said, chemically controlled? Like, someone like that would, I would imagine, not want any kind of control associated with her.
You would totally not trust anybody at that point.
Exactly.
You know?
But here's the thing. I know how they could have fixed that. I absolutely hated the chemically induced thing. I'm pretty sure we all did, because that was just the way I pictured the Red Room. It was like almost like, Natasha Romanoff and her physical fix
Psychological.
Psychological.
psychologically thing, like almost like torture practically.
Well, it's very much the way terrorists indoctrinate, the terrorist organizations indoctrinate, their members.
Like that, sort of something like that. But what if, let's just say, what if, frick, I have no idea what.
Did you lose your thought?
What
No.
if
What
I
if-
don't know what I was going to say?
What if comes out in August?
What if I can remember what I was about to say? Let me.
but like-
I'll give my thought real quick, and then maybe you can see if you remember what it is that you were going to say and make that point.
think?
So my thing.
Think, damn you!
The reason why I wasn't totally like turned off by that detail is it's kind of a story element that you see a lot with these kinds of characters. They've never lived any other kind of life. So there might be a small part of them that, I mean, if you look at Natasha, it's similar, like she had this ability to live her own free life and do whatever she wanted to do. And she still chose to be an Avenger and do all this other stuff. What they choose to do with their free will ends up being what they've done their whole life, just in a different way, colored a different way.
But let me.
And the last point I'll say is
let-
that nobody knows that Contessa is a villain yet. That's kind of clear, I think. They're just like, oh, this is just some woman, and they might think that she's working for the government. It seems like it when we see her in Falcon and the Winter Soldier. It seems like she's working for a government agency, trying to do the right thing. But I mean, that's why, like, I'm not going to say I love the scene. I thought it was I do agree that it was kind of a little out of place. It was just meant to set up the Hawkeye series, and it was meant to give closure to Natasha that should have been done maybe a little differently, or maybe years ago. But I'm not
At
totally
least
off.
somebody recognized Natasha.
Yeah.
Which is something we haven't seen. Like in Endgame, we got the big funeral scene for RDJ. Yeah. Natasha got nothing.
I was still
so
upset.
This is kind of like an apology for that film.
Yeah.
And saying, hey, somebody does care about Black Widow, Natasha Romanoff.
Not the Avengers.
I'm gonna
somebody else.
Right. Not the Avengers. Definitely. I'm gonna say I'm gonna just put 2 points to what you said, and then I'm gonna kick it back to Eli, because do you remember what you were gonna say? Yeah. Okay, so he remembers. Keep that thought.
Write down.
Yes,
okay.
Yes. I got it.
Okay. But I'm gonna say two things. And I hope I remember the second, because now I'm losing it. But in terms of Natasha Romanoff, I think it's a little bit different, and this is the reason why. Natasha is haunted by the things that she did, because she thought she was doing things in her mind because it was right, and it wasn't because she was being mind controlled psychologically by the Red Room. And so the reason for her defection to SHIELD is kind of, and they mention it quite a bit in the movies, her ledger is red, and she's trying to find a way to kind of what's the word, to kind of
Or like clear the ledger, maybe, or
exactly, you know what I'm saying? So her move to shield makes sense in that respect because she's done so many bad things in the past. This is her absolution from all of that stuff. This is her penance, you know. I've done all these bad things. Now I'm going to go to Shield and I'm gonna change the narrative here. You know, I know people are still gonna see me as the assassins because remember when she opened up Hydra in Civil War. Was it Civil War? No, Winter Soldier. Everybody knew her past at that point.
right? Yeah. Mhm.
So her life at that point is an open book. Everything that she's done for Shield is kind of trying to right the wrongs that she did when she was working for the Red Room. So it's a little bit different with her going to Shield, whereas Yelena, who was chemically induced and had no free will to do it, you know, now is her time to kind of party and kind of do things on her own, but yet she still chooses to go to Countessa. Now, I understand your point where it's like, well, I've lived this life so long, you know, what do I do? But this is where, as a character, you grow, right? And she's not doing that, so it's
Maybe.
kind of like
I think
right.
the
And like I said, we don't know yet. We don't know
the
yet.
final hint that I
Right?
think that she's not growing was in one of the scenes that I thought was one of the funniest when she was talking about that vest. It was a
Yeah.
military vest. It was cool.
Mm-hmm.
It was her making her own choice. It was still a military vest with packs
Right.
for ammo and all this other stuff. So to me, that was
Mm-hmm.
a hint that her mindset still isn't completely changed. And the fact that she's going to like freaking kill Hawkeye apparently shows that she's not completely free of that. But you know what?
Right.
We'll see what happens. Like you said, we'll see where these stories go, where these shows go, and what happens when she shows up in Hawkeye, which is late 2021. I checked that.
Okay.
At least that's the
Cool.
most recent confirmation. You know how these things have gotten pushed back. So we'll see.
The last point that I'm going to make is yes, we don't know that whether the Countessa is a good or a bad individual in the MCU, but it's interesting that she's recruiting morally ambiguous characters.
Right. No, actually, my point wasn't necessarily that we don't know if she's good or bad. She's probably going to be bad, but we don't know what
Mhm.
types of missions and interactions
And we don't
she's having
and
with
we don't
them.
know
Right?
yeah, we don't know what her deal is at this point, but we kind of see where it's going because, you know, you don't recruit John Walker, especially after all the things that he's done, and say, well, you know, you're going to do a service for your country and whatnot. You know what I'm saying? And Yelena, again, another one who's kind of like you don't know yet what she is. You know, we saw it in the movie, but that's more on a personal level, like us kind of dropping into this family setting. We don't know as a whole, you know, at least the world doesn't, what Yelena is. So, you know, these are two very morally ambiguous characters that she's recruiting, and you got to wonder what is she doing here. So that's all I'm going to say on that. Eli, hit us with your
You still
point.
remember it?
I just realized how stupid my idea sounds, but I have another idea.
Okay.
Okay.
Right?
You're okay with
What
stupid
if-
ideas.
What if comes out in August?
She's building the Dark Avengers.
That's a theory.
Yeah, I
That's not a
mentioned
stupid idea at all.
Oh, you guys already
That's
said
not a
that?
theory.
We mentioned that.
The Dark Avengers.
Damn it.
She's-
Damn it!
She's kind of playing the Norman Osborn role here. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So
Damn.
So
I think it's a great
quite
theory.
possible. Your theory, yeah, it's not a dumb theory. It's actually an
It's
awesome
out there
No, that
too.
was
Like
my
you know,
other theory.
you know.
My other theory was dumb.
What was the other theory? I just want to hear it.
That she has been controlling Yelena from the very start. What if Yelena has always answered to her?
It's possible too. That would make more sense.
That's
Because she's very much a shadowy figure in the background, but clearly she has some sort of power. And then not power in terms of superhero power, but like real world
yeah,
power.
well, that's weird
know?
because I just realized that wouldn't fit with like the weird spray thingy.
Oh, the thing that looked like
Yeah,
Wanda's.
why-
Yeah, that's
Wanda's,
another thing. I thought that
thing.
was derived from the hex for some reason. I don't know why.
It had that very similar vibe, kind of like when Wanda kind of hexed the superheroes, especially the Hulk. You know,
How the hell would they do that?
I don't know how you would capture that essence, but hey, weirder things have happened,
That was
right?
the worst idea in like history, in the history of ideas, to have it like a chemically induced, because then it's just another Winter Soldier. No, it's not
No.
It
even just
is.
another Winter
Well,
Soldier.
But that's a really good comparison because you know what? These Red Room assassins, they're basically the
But
female version of Winter Soldier.
not even really, because Winter Soldier
In a
was more
sense.
Well,
psychological.
Right,
no, but
exactly.
not. Well, we're talking about in function.
Yeah.
Because Winter Soldiers,
Yeah,
as
I
they
know.
were designed, were also they were supposed to topple governments, this, that, and the
Same
other.
thing.
They're basically
There's a-
successful Winter Soldiers.
There's a lot of
Wait,
people toppling
hold on.
governments and toppling governments in the MCU, right?
Whoa. Yo,
You know.
what if the Winter Soldier organization and the Winter Soldier organization was Hydra, right?
Yeah.
Yes.
Oh, damn! I had a good idea there.
And I think there was 6 Winter Soldiers that are no longer on this Earth, well, on their Earth because of Baron Zemo.
They just screwed it up with the chemically induced serums and stuff.
Well, I have a question actually because there's a possible plot hole there. And did you guys maybe catch this? And I didn't catch it in the movie. I was watching it kind of late, so maybe I missed the detail. But like, why wasn't Natasha mind controlled? Everybody else was. She had that
no,
pheromone
because
thing,
again,
right?
yeah, but that's different.
Yeah,
What
she was-
hers was completely psychological. They did mention
But
it.
why?
Yeah, why?
Why?
Because I think
Why
the
was she
chemical thing
different?
came afterwards. Because I think the
they
chemical
didn't have
thing
the
came
technology
afterwards.
back
Remember,
then, though.
But they took in
Natasha was older when she was indoctrinated into Red Room.
But they were indoctrinated
And-
at the same time, though. Her and her sister were
Yeah,
indoctrinated
Yelena
at the
and-
exact same time. They took them away at the exact same time.
Yeah, they
Yeah.
were.
No, I don't think so.
Yes,
No, I
Red
don't
Guardian.
think
Remember,
so
Red
either.
Guardian let them both be taken by the organization.
Right. But remember, there is a scene where they're parsing out who they're going to take, and they took Natasha. They did not take a Yelena because Dreykov went up to her and said, "Okay, this one." So the implication is that Natasha got indoctrinated first. Yelena came shortly after.
Okay.
But even
Because
still,
Natasha was already advanced, and I think that was the purpose of the scene where she, when they're being separated, that Natasha was the one that pulled out the gun, and kind of disarmed the guard and stuff like that, to show that she was already more advanced in terms of the assassin qualities you need to be in the Red Room. And Dreykov made it a point to pick her and not the sister.
but that still doesn't make sense because when did she leave the Red Room? Probably like a little bit before.
We don't know. And see, that's the problem with this movie is
Budapest.
like you touch upon
Budapest.
Oh well, Budapest, yes, that's true.
exact- But at that point, they should have already the serum, because then you have Yelena at that point who's being put into the
It's a
organization
bit of a
thing.
plot
Well,
hole, I
maybe
think.
that's when they started
yeah,
using the chemical.
And then
because-
why didn't they use it on Black Widow?
Because they probably didn't have it.
But then how did they use it on the rest of the
by
world?
the
I
end,
think
she
what-
could
what
have definitely been
made-
controlled. They could have said, "Hey, Hydra,
Yeah, that was.
here's some of this control." Or
Let's just.
they could have used it.
Well,
after
first
the
of all,
fact.
you know what? How about this? Because remember, the implication of Black Widow defecting the Shield is that she thought she got rid of the Red Room.
That
What
is
if
true
her
too.
defecting from the Red Room said, "Okay, we got to maybe streamline this a little bit. We got to have a better handle on these widows." So you know what? Chemical indoctrination. Boom.
And I agree that that's the way it went because you know what, like you said, there was no reason to believe that the way that they were doing was wrong because quite clearly they've been doing this a long time. And I think Natasha was the first to probably, and again, we don't know because we didn't get a proper origin story for this. But I think Natasha, and again, we're kind of like trying to piece this together. Natasha may have been the first to kind of break that hold. And that may have gone into Melina now going and saying, you know what, we need to find another way to do this. Let's do this chemically, because then that way we have full control of all of our assassins.
Okay.
There's no way that they can break it because we're doing it this way.
Well, hold on.
You know,
Why didn't they try and take care of Natasha? I figure that's the first
You
person
can't
you want
go
to get rid
after
of.
an Avenger
yeah,
because then
Natasha
they're
was
getting out
too
of the
high
shadows,
profile at that
bro.
point. The whole
They
point of the
mentioned
Red
that.
Room is that they're working in the shadows to go after Natasha, and he even mentioned it at the end. He was like, "Now that I have an Avenger in my midst, now we can go out and be open about this stuff." You know,
Nah, that was stupid.
but I think that plot hole was badly done. But I think there's a way to explain it. But again, we won't know because the origin story of Black Widow was so poorly done in this movie. You know, we got just bits and pieces of it. We still don't know the full story yet. She's still kind of a mystery, if you think about it.
Yeah. Yeah.
Mm.
Huh. All right. So I guess on that note, what I would like to maybe close out with is theories as to what exactly I'm curious as to what you guys think is going to happen with the Contessa. And my theory, I'll throw it out there, is that it's been hinted at that we're going to see possibly Red Hulk and characters like that in the future. We're going to see more stuff from Thunderbolt Ross, which is why a lot of people are saying that he was also in this movie. He's been in a couple of movies recently just to have a little cameo, just to remind us that Thunderbolts Ross still exists in this continuity. So I think that what that's going to lead up to is maybe him allying with Contessa, with all these other characters, and creating that supervillain team that he has in the comics where he's the Red Hulk. Because we're getting Abomination back too. You know, Abomination is going to be in Shang-Chi.
Yes.
So
He was fighting
Come back
Wong
of
in
the
the trailer.
century.
Exactly. So they're setting up all these characters that are in Thunderbolt Ross's villains team. They're bringing him back. I think that that's kind of where this is going to lead as to what their main, like what their goal is going to be. That I'm not too sure yet, because in the comics it was always about chasing certain characters.
Thunderbolt Ross is a little problematic in terms of him becoming the Red Hulk because he's kind of gone past that role. You know, the reason that he became Red Hulk is because he was hunting down the Hulk.
Yeah.
The Hulk is not a threat in the MCU the way he was in the comics, which again is
It could be again though. There's World War
it
Hulk. There's
could,
World War
but
Hulk rumblings out there. So if he gets to
I
World War
know,
Hulk
but
level, that's a threat.
but he's gotten past just hunting down one character.
Now it's about
He's
supers
taken
in
more
general.
of a politician role as opposed to a general.
Okay, son.
You know what I'm saying? So for him to change into Red Hulk seems a little weird at this point. That they would have to find a great way of putting him in that role again, because I understood the reasons why he did it in the comics. I cannot for the life of me find a path for him to do it in the MCU.
Abomination,
Because
or somebody kills his
I
daughter.
think he's what I would think is that maybe he has a son or somebody that takes on the role, and maybe he's avenging Ross from dying, and so his way of doing it is by, you know what, I can't beat these guys on a level the way my father was doing it. Maybe I have to become the Red Hulk. That I can see, but we don't have any hints of that except for the daughter.
I mean,
Okay.
I guess what happens, they have to kind of bring her back into the fold to make it work, I guess, right? Because Betsy Ross is in it. They would have to bring back Jennifer Connelly.
That would be wild if Betsy Ross becomes Betty Ross.
Betty Ross, yeah.
Becomes Betty Ross.
No, it's
becomes
Betsy.
the Red
It's Betsy.
Hulk. That would be.
It's Betsy Ross. Or it's both. It's both. I'm sorry. No, it's both. It's both. I'm looking at the Marvel Wiki right now. Apparently, it's Betsy or Betty. I don't know why the heck it's both, but going on.
That would be wild though if she becomes the Red Hulk, right?
What if they take this Hulk and make him into Gray Hulk?
That makes no
Ruffalos?
sense.
Huh?
Ruffalos right now?
I don't think they're going to do that anymore.
Oh, you mean
because Gray Hulk got
Gray
Hulk got replaced by so many other Hulks in the comics. You know what I mean? Like the Gray Hulk, like him having both personalities and all that. Like he got surpassed a long time ago by various iterations of Hulk, like Professor Hulk, and then World War Hulk.
Professor Hulk in the MCU.
Yeah, World War Hulk is totally,
Well, Gray Hulk is sorry. Go on.
Go ahead. I was gonna say just World War
Yeah,
Hulk
well,
or World Breaker Hulk is
so
also intelligent. Like all the various intelligent Hulks are still in there that could just kind of take his place, the Gray Hulk's place.
yeah, but like at least way back when, where all these other insane Hulks didn't exist, from what I remember, Gray Hulk was just a tad bit stronger than Green Hulk, but he was also a little bit smarter.
No, he was weaker than Green
Right.
Hulk. Physically, he was weaker than Green Hulk.
Really?
Yeah, that was his weakness. He was smarter,
Oh,
but he was physically
well,
weaker than the Green Hulk. There, eventually, I think,
And
eventually,
we already have
he
that iteration in the
yeah.
MCU right
But
now.
eventually, I think he perfected the Gray Hulk transformation. Don't quote me on this. And he did eventually become stronger than Green Hulk. But I think soon after that, he went back to being Green Hulk anyway. So it would be
but
more like
then
an Easter egg to have Gray Hulk in there. It wouldn't really be a plot element that would work so well. I guess
Just have a
depending on what happens in She Hulk.
quick transformation.
A lot of this stuff is depending on what we're going to see in these shows coming up, right? Because we got to see what's going to happen
but
with She Hulk.
how would World War Hulk work?
Right now, it can't
It-
because of the fact that Universal owns the rights to the Hulk. So it makes it near impossible to have that storyline done. Well, I guess you
I think they
can do it in
will.
the vein of like an Avengers or
Yeah, I think
a
they'll do it.
collaborative type of movie. You know,
I mean,
Well,
I think that they kind of have to a certain extent because they're going to bring in some of the characters that are in the Illuminati, even though some of them have already been removed. The ones that send him
yo,
to that planet in the first place. But who knows?
right? But we've already touched on that kind of already
Yeah.
with Ragnarok. So again, it makes it kind of hard to go back to it unless they change the storyline completely.
Bro.
And it's a little difficult because Professor Hulk as a whole is weaker, but remember, he also lost a lot of his power using the Infinity Gauntlet.
Yeah, but in the comics,
So
Professor Hulk is like how do I put this? He's
I would love to see him transition into Immortal Hulk,
well,
to be quite
he's
honest.
another poor version of the Hulk. He ends up being a weaker version of the Hulk, and in the comics, he ends up, again, like there's been a million different Hulks. You know this as a fan of the Hulk, but he gets transcended by another Hulk in the comics, which is again always happens. But
Yeah.
he ends up,
Eli has
ends up
something-
being an inferior version of the Hulk, even though he seems to be superior. He's not. So I guess we'll see.
Right.
But you're right. There's a lot of plot holes or plot elements that might make it difficult. But we do know that Marvel and the MCU tends to take some of those details and turn it into something different. So we'll see.
Right.
I'd love to see something like that happen. I want to see a Hulk movie. I know you want to see it too, but
Oh, I'm dying
knows?
to see a proper one done.
what are the theories we
Eli.
have? Go ahead.
Imagine this.
Mm-hmm.
Either in the the She-Hulk show,
Yeah.
or a show of its own where it's like animated and noir. Imagine Ross. This is gonna be a little bit far fetched. Ross has secretly been working with his government to create a serum, so that they could, because they don't have control over the Avengers,
Mm-hmm.
so they could create a serum that gives them a little bit more freedom to like sort of push them out, like a Red Hulk sort
I
of
like
thing,
where you're
like the
going with
serum.
this.
And then Detective Hulk could be investigating it. He'll be looking into the government, trying to figure out what's actually going on with the serum.
But you know what?
That sounds
I-
more like a what if.
No,
than
but I
something
like
that'll
where you're
happen
going
in
with
the
this because
MCU.
this opens up a very interesting possibility because, like you said, Ross feels like he can't control the Avengers. What if Contessa is working with Ross secretly as a shadow organization to create, like
The
what
serum.
you said? Well, not even the serum. He's creating the Dark Avengers by using Contessa to kind of counteract the Avengers.
Yeah.
It's like a shadow group of the government, and his Contessa is actually reporting up to Ross.
Yeah.
That's not
That's-
a bad theory at all.
That's why we haven't seen him that much. That's why he's just sort of been on the not even on the sidelines, like he's basically been in the shadows for a majority of these of these shows. Like we just recently saw him in Black Widow, right?
Mhm.
And he
yeah.
wasn't really even doing anything. He was just there.
He
So
was
maybe
hunting them down, hunting the Avengers down.
oh yeah. So maybe
know.
they're pushing him a little bit more to the shadows to create the Red Hulk. Yes.
Could be.
And then Detective Hulk will be trying to figure out what's going on.
Okay, who's Detective Hulk though?
Grey Hulk.
Where is he?
This is
How
what
is
if
he?
what if because this Hulk is like gaining more of a consciousness almost because he's more of like more intelligent. Maybe somehow that causes him to become more gray, and over time he becomes Gray Hulk.
Well, not for nothing, he does look a little grayer
Yeah.
in Endgame.
So what if it's like more of a
Yeah.
transition
Not for
into
nothing.
Detective Hulk? Detective Hulk.
It's
Yes.
a possibility.
Fix it.
I thought we were talking about Black Widow. We've kind of
Yeah,
this
became a
jumped the
tangent.
shark here in terms of Hulk. Listen, I love talking about Hulk. You know what I'm
Well, I
saying?
mean, it's tying into.
Dang it, even on Black Widow's own podcast.
Yeah, no, I was looking for the name of it. I mean, it's tying into. Well, the Thunderbolts and the Dark Avengers are
Yes.
tied in the comics, right? And what Baron
Mhm.
Zemo is a Dark Aven- or one of the Thunderbolts or one of the Dark Avengers, if I'm not mistaken, right? Like
I
there's
think the Thunderbolt. I think is on the Thunderbolt team.
Yelena was a
But
Dark
I could be wrong.
Avenger. Like they're setting all these people up to be in those teams. Maybe they'll take one of them, maybe they'll take both of them, maybe they'll create a new team, but I'm really, really, really almost certain that they're gonna do something with Thunderbolt Ross and Red Hulk in the near future. It's just a matter of what they end up doing. And I think when we see She-Hulk, I think that's going to be the movie that tells us the most about where they're going to go with the Thunderbolts, the Dark Avengers, Red Hulk, Gray Hulk, whatever you want to theorize. And
Would make sense.
we'll see what happens there.
Definitely makes sense.
Do we have any other thoughts or theories or opinions about the film before we wrap this bad boy up? Going once.
I think for a film that we liked, I think we've beaten down Black Widow a bit much.
Hey, we enjoy it.
We enjoyed
but
it.
We are tough
but
critics.
There's some.
Yeah.
Yes, we are.
We try to be. At
least.
least.
We've kind of beaten down Black Widow here,
especially.
And I feel a little bad.
Like I said, at this point, it's especially. I feel like this is a topic we could definitely talk about in the future. But like, I'm not saying Marvel fatigue is setting back in, but like, it almost feels like it didn't go away again because of the formulaic nature of some of these movies. And I'll say this as my closing thought. I said this yesterday while I was watching Black Widow and saying what we said here, basically, which is it's a fun movie. It's a good movie. It has some formulaic stuff that makes it less than it could be. Like I said on a previous cast, I am super looking forward to the Eternals because the Eternals is a very different story in the comics. It's not about them going and fighting supervillains all the time. A lot of it is just dialogue, drama, the psychology of it. They're literal gods. So like, who are they going to mess with? So, and it being directed by Chloe Zhao, who just won an Oscar for Nomadland, I think that there's some opportunity for Marvel to expand beyond some of the cliches that they've stuck to, even still in some of these shows and movies that we're watching now. But we'll see.
Yeah,
we'll see.
If they're gonna do it, they're gonna do it in that film.
Yeah.
So that's gonna be a very, very interesting thermometer of where Marvel's taking us.
Yes, I totally agree with that. And I will say this: that's one of the movies we haven't been to the movies in a long time. I really want to see that in the theater. I'm just throwing it out there.
That comes out when again?
I think October. Let me double check. Let's find out. Like,
hey,
yeah,
that works.
Yeah, it might be for like around your birthday, right? I think it's October. It's around then. Let me just double check because I'm gonna leave, like I said, with that final thought. I want to go back to the movies. I know Wolfie has gotten a chance to go back to the movies. And by the way, buddy, we missed you today. We hope you're feeling better. So yeah, the Eternals comes out in November 5th. November 5th. So a little after, but I can't wait.
Okay.
And let's see what happens then. Maybe we'll get a chance to see it in the theater and see where all this goes. And that's that.
Sounds good.
All right.
Cool.
So on that note, we do the usual, saying goodbye to y'all. Thank you for bearing with us through this episode. If there's anything you want to give us feedback on, you can reach out to us on Instagram at Get Geek Podcast. Slide into our DMs and let us know how we did. Let us know what you enjoyed as well. the best way to support your favorite podcast crew, as you know, is to like, rate, share, subscribe, and comment on our social media posts, as well as following us on the various podcast platforms, liking, rating, sharing, and subscribing on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, wherever your favorite podcasts are sold. So please, if you've listened this far, I'm guessing you're a fan. We're about an hour and a half into this episode. You wouldn't listen if you weren't. Give us some support. We always appreciate it. We appreciate y'all fans out there. Thanks for joining us on this episode about Black Widow with a little side of Loki. And other than that, there's just one thing left for us to say, and that is stay geeky, my friends.
Red Hulk. Fix it.
Ultra.
Thunderbolts.
Ew.
Yes.
Black Knight and
He's
Grandmaster.
already in the universe
King
again.
and Conqueror.
He will come back.
Eternals.
Fantastic Four.
Black Knight is going to kill King the Conqueror.
Kang Enterprises. All right, I'm gonna cut this off now. Thanks, guys. Peace.
Red Knight.
Later.
Ultra.